to episode 9 of Beers with VCs, where we have casual conversations about the less talked about aspects of venture capital and startup building. We are your hosts, Sabrina Passman and Simon Lancaster, and today we are very excited to be joined by Chrissy Meyer. She has an incredible career. She started by building a strong engineering base from her experience operating and leading teams at Apple and Square, before becoming a founding member of a startup called Pearl Automation. And for the past 6 years, she's been a general partner at Root Ventures. We are thrilled to have her on the podcast. Chrissy, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you, guys.
Fantastic.
Welcome, Chrissy.
We're super excited.
Happy Friday.
We'll start off by, what are we drinking today? You want to start us off, Chrissy?
I am sorry to disappoint, but I am not drinking beer. It's 8:30 in the morning.
Very understandable.
I wish I were that hardcore. But instead, this is a peppermint mocha with extra peppermint.
I love it.
Only 46 grams of sugar in 1 cup. But
oh yeah, that's how you have to do the holidays. I'm right on board with you. I have a nice cider, so yeah, all the sugar right early in the morning is the best way to wake up, I guess. So happy holidays. And how about you, Simon?
Yeah, happy holidays. Even though this is a slightly pre-recorded in the morning, I did go as promised in the last episode and made some homemade mulled wine. So this is a blend of Cabernet Sauvignons, several, mostly California, with a selection of spices, cinnamon, cardamom. I even put some chili in there to warm me up.
Oh my gosh.
So ready for this one.
Gourmet
if I knew that you were making mulled wine, I would have come over to your place.
I made a lot. I'm going to bottle it. So you're welcome to come anytime in the next few weeks.
I love it. You got to get ready for the holidays for sure.
Cheers.
Amazing. Cheers, everyone. Woohoo. All right, amazing. So Chrissy, we're so excited to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and why you're so passionate about helping early stage founders?
Totally. How far back do you go? I can be abbreviate a life story or the full life.
Your background is incredibly inspiring to engineers like myself. So feel free to go back into the engineering days.
Okay. So I grew up. So I actually grew up in Kentucky. So land of horse racing and bourbon and fried chicken. But I was surrounded by manufacturing, even growing up. I mean, in Louisville, they have the Ford plant. There's a big Ford plant that they do a lot of assembly of big trucks. There's Toyota has a big automotive factory right outside of town. GE had a huge appliance park where they did assembly of refrigerators and washers and dryers. So if you studied engineering in Kentucky, it was very, very likely that you were going to end up in some sort of manufacturing or manufacturing adjacent job, or automotive supply chain. And I think that a lot of people ended up going that approach. So I actually spent my summers when I was in college interning at steel processing plants out in
that's unique.
Yeah, it is. It was, and it was they called it steel pickling, and it's they have these
Oh,
giant hydrochloric acid baths that they run steel through in order to strip off all of the rust and corrosion.
Wow, I've never seen that process, but I know that Batman featured these large acid pools. I wonder if it was
yes, it was that. It was nasty stuff. It's pretty nasty chemicals. It's not glamorous at all. It's a pretty dirty process. But to be honest with you, that was kind of my first time getting a look into how physical things get made, how stuff actually gets made in the real world. And I think it kind of I don't know, it just lit a fire inside of me. I was like, this is cool. This is really, really cool. And this is an early step in the supply chain, because then the steel rolls would go and they would get stamped and they would get, built into car chassis and then shipped off and assembled into vehicles. But it just kind of lit this fire inside of me, and I got excited about building physical things. So when I graduated college, I went opposite direction. I moved to Boston and worked on military satellites, still hardware, but very, very different than steel pickling. And And then I went back to grad school. So I moved out to California. I guess it was like, it's been more than 15 years now. Really dating myself, but came out to Stanford, studied electrical engineering, got I don't know, a couple years into a PhD program, and then dropped out because I was interning at Apple at the time, and they really
What year was that, Kristen?
This was 2000, late 2007, early 2008. When did you guys start? When were you guys?
I started June 2008, so we probably just missed each other.
Sabrina, when
I was 2014, so yeah. I think I just missed you there.
Yeah. Well, 2000, like late 2007, early 2008 was like an amazing like time to be there. Simon, I don't know if you remember this, but it was like the launch of the first
iPhone,
and it felt like there was it's like a beer bash every day. Like every day, it was insane, just the amount of like excitement and like partying and and it was such a stark contrast because I went from eating ramen in my dorm room to like unlimited free beer like every other day. And also, I don't know if you remember, this was pre DoorDash. They had this thing called waiter.com that would like deliver you takeout meals at 7 p.m. to your desk.
Wow.
Evening. And like at that time, like pre DoorDash, that was such a big deal. It was like, holy shit, I get free beer and dinner delivered to me every night. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, this is too good to be true.
You were obviously in engineering. I was in ops. They were a little more stingy, but we did get to travel overseas on Apple's 5-star hotel budget. That was nice.
That's really funny.
I'd be eating in Taipei. You'd be eating your waiter.com pizza in Cupertino. So probably worked out in the end. But no, that time was crazy. It was like iPhone had just come out, and BlackBerry was at its peak. It was crazy time. Yeah.
But it was such a crazy time to be there because I think Apple clearly knew how to scale and they clearly had a playbook, but at the same time, a lot of the like frameworks and a lot of the playbooks were kind of being rethought and like redeveloped, and no one had scaled to the level that like iPhone was about to scale. So there was still a lot that we were just like figuring out. And I'd also say that, I was on the iPod, like I worked on iPod touches in the beginning. I did an iPhone project. I worked on the first watch before it came out. But I'd say that like the coolest thing about being there at that time is that like the teams were still relatively small. I think now it's like grown and exploded to the point that there's so much like specialization and people are kind of like pigeonholed into very, very specific components or very, very specific parts of projects. And that's what you do. But like back when I was on iPods, it was like, there were probably less than like 80 people working on the core product. And when we would travel to a prototype build in China, there would be like 12 of us that went. And that very quickly ballooned to like 150 people going or 200 people going. But it was like fun to still be pretty lean because you got to do more and you got to touch more and you got more ownership, which was fun for me. Like as an engineer, I think coming out of college, I knew nothing. Like I really was pretty green when I joined, and Apple just gives you such a, throw you in the deep end kind of education about not just how to design consumer hardware, but how to scale it. Like that's like designing products that are going to ship tens of millions that's a special beast. And it's a totally, it's next level challenging. And I think getting an education in that was super fun. So I mean, I'm similar to you guys. I worked 100-hour weeks and I was in China for like months at a time, but I loved every second of it. Like I loved it. And wouldn't
fire hose for sure.
Yeah. Totally. Like would not have changed any bit of it. Well, maybe so. I might have stayed there a little bit too long. I think 6 years. 6 years was
yeah. So why did you leave? I'm curious.
You know, by the end of 6 years, first I was just burnt out. Like
I know that struggle.
That's one gets working 100-hour weeks for 6 years straight.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it also, as Apple grew, the teams grew up around me. And like, as you kind of advance in your career, you realize that you're going to hit a point where, you know, you're managing people and you're growing a team. And there's exciting pieces of that. But I also feel like at a place like Apple and a company that's at that scale, climbing the management chain means dealing with more and more bullshit and bureaucracy.
And less like actual problem solving and stuff.
Yeah, politics between teams consumes your life.
Yeah.
And that is most of what you do. And to be honest with you, like, I'm kind of an engineer's engineer, and I don't get excited by that piece of it. And navigating big company politics was not something that I was like super excited to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
So then after Apple, where did you go? And like, how did you know what you want to do next?
Yeah, well, so after Apple, I went to Square, and Square was, I knew I wanted to stay in hardware. Like, I loved building things. And Square was pretty early at the time. So they were a couple hundred people, 200-300 people. And a friend of mine, also from the iPod team, had gone over to Square. And the story is he was trying to recruit me out of Apple for a while. And Square had a really phenomenal cafeteria at the time. And they also did
food motivated.
Every single day, he would send me pictures of the food he was eating. And then they introduced
FOMO.
Yeah. They did this thing called Guac-a-clock, where every day at 3:00 they would have chips and guacamole. So then every day at noon he'd send me a picture of the lunch food, and then every day at 3:00 I'd get a picture of like chips and guacamole. And it was a very effective recruiting tactic for someone who's like very food motivated. It only took a few weeks of that, and I was like, that's it, I'm going to Square.
I love it.
Yeah, but so I was at Square. So I also joined the hardware team, and this was like back when, you know, phones still had audio jacks. We were building the little like credit card dongle that like plugged into your audio jack.
What stage were they, Chrissy?
So they were, oh gosh, pretty late. They had raised quite a bit of money, a few hundred people. So it was stable. It was stable, but it felt like a startup coming from Apple. So like going from Apple to a few hundred person company, it was a startup in my mind. And it you know, very much had startup vibes. Everybody was still doing a little bit of everything, and people were still pretty scrappy at that time. But yeah, it was and to be honest with you, I was really happy there. Like really happy there. I love the people that I was working with. I love the factories that I was working with and the suppliers. Like I thought it was great. So the hardest career decision I've ever had to make was when some of my friends from Apple came to me and said, we're starting a company. Like, are you in? And you know, these were like, you know, my managers at Apple and like some of the best people I had worked with from the iPod team. And these are the people that I would like follow to the ends of the earth. And I had only been at Square for a little over a year. And again, this was 2014. This was 2015. So it was like before they IPO'd, but they were on track to IPO. And it was just like the company had grown from a few hundred people to 1,200 people by the time I left. Wow. Like it was like crazy exciting time to be at Square. And I genuinely enjoyed it. So like having to make the decision to walk away from that was ridiculously hard. And I you know, agonized over it. But then, you know, it was just like, look, like this is a true early stage startup. Like I'd be joining at, you know, from day zero and get exposure into a type of like company building that you just don't get that opportunity that often. And these are people that I know and that I've worked closely with and that I trust and that I'd be excited to like navigate this with. So I ended up not only did I leave Square, my husband was still at Apple at the time, and he left his job at Apple, and we both quit our jobs and did the startup and
The same startup.
the same startup at the same time.
Wow.
That's a big commitment, man.
Talk about going all in.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was kind of crazy because we hadn't raised money at the time. So we were like, well, we don't know how long we're going to go with not getting paid. And like, we don't know. And we didn't have there was no product idea. We had some like general thoughts of what direction we might want to go, but like there was no office, there was no product idea, there was no funding. But we both were like, hey, we're all in. Like we want to do this. Like this is special. This is a unique opportunity, and like we want to try it out. So that was 2014. Mm-hmm. So we started Pearl. We had a really good run. We raised $50 million. We grew the team to 80 something people. We shipped a product, like we got it out there into the world. Never really got product market fit, and had a series of unfortunate things go south and had to shut the company down. So we shut it down. I think it was back in 2017. It was like midway through 2017. It was like after a few years. And I think that, I mean, when it comes to early stage startups, it very, very much is a roller coaster. But from my experience, and I don't know if you guys agree or have seen this too, but I feel like people experience that and get off that roller coaster, and they either go one direction or the other. They're either like, I never want to do that again. That was like, I want to. And when we shut down Pearl, I'd say the vast majority of people went back to Apple. Like they wanted to go back to a big company job and stability and a paycheck. But then there's this small subset of people that are like, that roller coaster was amazing. I want to do it again and again and again and again. You like kind of get hooked on the rush of it. And I very much fell into that bucket and that.
Yeah. Bucket number 2. I love it.
Yeah. And it's just like, I know that was an emotional wild ride, and I've never, like, the highs have never been as high and the lows have never been as low, but like, wow, that was fun. I want to do it again.
I resonate with the story so much. I think it takes a specific kind of mentality in person to love the torture that is early stage startup life. And it's so interesting to see how you've kind of like jumped from like large to smaller to smaller to smaller. And now you're even one stage earlier in venture. So how, talk to me about that venture switch and like what really drew you to that.
So that's a funny story because it was never intentional. It was never intentional. I never intended to become a VC. I never thought it was even an option. I didn't know what VCs did. Like it was very much a black box to me. I got a little bit of exposure to see kind of how they operated when I was at Pearl, but like still, it was still a huge, a huge mystery to me. So I got the intro when I was like right after Pearl had shut down. I was trying to figure out like what I wanted to do next, and what did I want to start something myself? Did I want to join an early stage startup? Like, what did I want to do? So I was trying to figure that out, and was taking a little bit of time off. And I was introduced to Avidan and Kane, and they were at a firm called Root Ventures. They were the tail end of investing out of their first fund, which was like a $30 million fund at the time. And I remember meeting them at the Blue Bottle in Palo Alto and sitting outside. And it was just like super chill, really hit it off with them. Loved the conversation. Like we talked about, Pearl retrospective and everything that went wrong there. We talked about their portfolio companies and some of the really cool things that they're doing. And I don't know, I remember like one coffee chat led to another coffee chat, led to another coffee chat. Then next thing I know, I'm hanging out at their office and spending more and more time in the dog patch in San Francisco at their office that had, I don't know if you guys ever visited, it had like we didn't have a conference room. So it was like a shed that we had bought from Home Depot that was like
No way. Oh my gosh, you guys have upgraded so much in that period of time. That's awesome.
But it was, I slowly got sucked into their ecosystem and started helping with diligence and supporting portfolio companies. And then I just remember like at some point being like, am I going to get paid? Like I'm doing a lot of work here, actually. Right. So then when they started their second fund, that is when I joined full-time as a partner and came on full-time as a partner. So it was just such a cool, I don't know. It was such a cool experience to just like not go from not even knowing that this was a career path or not even knowing that this was an option to just like very organically getting like sucked into the ecosystem. And then the next thing you know, I'm hooked. And that was 6 years ago. And I don't know what you guys think about venture, but it's just, it's so different from operating. It's so different from being in an operating role. It's so different from being a founder. And there's parts of it that are good and there's parts of it that are bad. But I think that there's this thrill that I get from like always learning that I don't think you get in other roles. It's like the thing that I think is most exciting about this role is like, I can be having a call and talking about the fashion industry and learning about the fashion industry. And then the next hour it's talking about, cancer diagnostics and molecular testing. And then the next hour it's about the commercial fishing industry and like robotics applied to the commercial fishing industry. Yeah. The dramatically different industries and topics. And like, I don't know, it's your core job is like learning as much, like doing a crash course and learning as much as you can about these dramatically different industries as quickly as you can. And there's something really thrilling about that. Like, I don't think
and finding like strategic alignment that might map between totally different industries, that always feels so exciting to me, and figuring out like why this business was successful way over in this vertical, but this other one could take the same path. I totally agree with that. It's hard to find a job that like keeps you engaged, because, everyone every year in I feel like the mechanical engineering hardware space kind of switches jobs every like 2 to 3 years because they want to try something new. They want to learn something new. And venture always keeps you on your toes. And it's incredibly clear that your path to venture was completely passion driven. And I've seen the way that affects the founders that you work with. It is incredible to see, like, you're again truly an engineer's engineer, but also have this passion to understand problems in a very deep way. And I think that's what really sets you and Root apart, which is we're obviously gigantic fans. I think one thing that I'm really interested in, now that you've been in venture for 6 years now, you started in 2017. How has the fundraising landscape changed in that period of time?
Oh man, it's so different. So different. Oh my gosh. But I mean, keep in mind, I joined Apple at the same time as Simon. It's like, that was the middle of a financial crisis, right?
Really?
Like at that point, it was like, oh man, I'm lucky to have a job. Like most people I know like don't. And when I joined Root, it was like the total opposite. Like everything was up and to the right. Everything was like going extremely well. Like new funds were popping up left and right. Like startups were going gangbusters. Everybody was raising. And I'd say like, honestly, the first 4 years I was in venture, the graduation rate, we talk a lot about, graduation rate of companies that we fund at the seed stage to Series A, like how many companies are able to successfully go raise a Series A. And it was like almost 100%, like almost 100%. Pretty much everyone who raised a seed was also able to raise a Series A. Yeah. And I don't think I really appreciated how not normal that was until now.
Seriously, yeah. Like 2018 to 2021 was an incredible up and to the right. And then everything came crashing down. We'll talk about that. But
and markups were happening so fast too. It was like making your head spin. It was like we had a couple deals where we would like do their seed round, and then 60 days later or 90 days later, Tiger would lead a Series A and like preempt a Series A, and it would be like a 4x, 5x markup on the valuation from like, clearly nothing has changed about the company in 60 days or 90 days. Like nothing has changed. And that sort of shit was happening a lot, which felt good. Like from a, as a new VC, it's like, woo, markups. Yeah. Everything felt great. Obviously a lot has changed in the past couple years, and it's pretty, it's sobering, right? Like it's definitely sobering. We've had more companies shut down this year than we have in, the past 5 or 6 years, like the entire history of Root, which is really, really tough to stomach. But also like Series A's look totally different now. And I'm sure you guys are seeing it too, but like now people want to see real customers and they want to see real traction and real revenue and consistent growth. And like, previously the prior 4 years, like Series A's
just momentum, basically.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's a different era. It's sobering, but I still think that there's a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's a lot of, just as a VC, there's part of me that gets excited about finding the companies that, that the opportunities where we can get more ownership early and help support them through this, times. So that when they are, things do take off, like we actually have a stronger position in the company.
Definitely. And I keep saying that it's not necessarily a bad time to start a company. It's just you have to understand how the strategy has changed. And you just need to figure out how to pivot your, not just the way that you pitch your company, but the way that you build your company has to be just slightly different. And I think maybe we can start from the ground level. So if you have your idea and you're ready to start fundraising, what are the core steps that you would tell a founder of like how to prep properly for your fundraise? Let's start with like pre-seed and seed first.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think, it almost doesn't matter what the stage is. Number one thing, and I think the most underrated thing when it comes to fundraising is just like the art of storytelling. And I think you and I, spoke on a panel a couple weeks ago, and I think Shaheen at Lux like nailed it. He was like, fundraising is all about storytelling. Like that's it. And I couldn't possibly agree more with that. And I think founders, it's like almost underrated. It's like founders spend so much time making the slides look pretty or trying to like land another deal with a potential customer or get an LOI signed or something so that it looks like there's more interest or excitement or traction. But I think that like people forget that all pitching is like it's a sales job, and it's telling and it's weaving a narrative, and whoever you're pitching, like you have to take them on an emotional journey. It's not about like reading off bullet points on a slide and making sure I hit the problem, solution, team, go to market,
all the features.
Yeah, it's not that. That's not what pitching is all about. It's about getting your audience to like viscerally feel the problem that you're trying to solve, or even if they've never really experienced it before. And it's about getting them to believe that you as a founder have like a really unique insight or a really unique approach that is the right way to tackle it that no one else is doing or no one else is thinking about, and getting them to believe that you're thinking big enough, that your market is big enough, and that your ambitions are big enough, because that's also a big hang up for VCs. And after that, like everything else is secondary. Like I think when it comes to preparing, yes, you need a deck. Like, of course you need a deck and it should look pretty, and like, yes, you need to build a list of target VCs, and yes, you need financials, historical financials and projected financials and models going out into the future. Like, yeah, you need all of those things. And those are like checkbox things. But again, like most of your time preparing, I think should be practicing the storytelling and the narrative building and like figuring out how not to jump to like, this is what we do, but make sure that like the VC is first like fully bought in on the why. Like, why does it matter? Like, why does this even matter? Like I really recently started engaging with a new executive coach, and he's awesome. He's really, really good. And he's worked with some of our founders before, but his focus is all on comms. And he actually comes from an acting background.
Oh, interesting.
He was an actor. And like we're spending so much time on like, how do you tell your story? Like when you go out to fundraise, Chrissy, like how do you talk about Root Ventures and how do you talk about yourself? And like, how do you do it in a way that's like authentic and that the passion comes through? And I think that's what I think most founders need in terms of like preparing to go out and pitch.
Completely agree. Especially as deep tech investors, we meet a lot of engineering founders. And I think the way that we've lived our engineering lives is problem solution first and just be like, my solution is like the million times better solution. Obviously, this is the right way to do it. But problem solution is like one sliver also of like what makes a successful business. And that like internalizing that was probably the hardest thing as I switched over from Apple to my startup, realizing that there's so much more to actually like making it to the finish line business wise, other than just making the solidest engineering product to ever exist.
Mm-hmm.
And breaking out of that to pitch, and the majority of the people you pitch to aren't going to be engineering background people that can really resonate with how good your solution is. It's all about the whole journey of why you're doing the thing that you're doing and how it's going to be changing the world. And I'm curious as to, it's not necessarily like the grandness of the vision. I think that really captures someone's attention or VC's attention. Like for you, Chrissy, like what makes a good story stand out from a bad story?
Yeah. I mean, I think the like first piece of it is just like, do I believe in the problem? Like, do I actually believe that this is a real problem and that it's a big enough problem for people that they're willing to like adopt a new tool or change their workflow or change their like inertia is a tough thing to overcome. And on the customer side, and I think that like you really have to believe that this pain point is worth solving and that it's big enough that people are willing to go out of their way or change their habits or do something a little bit different or try something new in order to get past it. So I think that like the good pitches that I've seen have actually spent a little bit more time in like building up the problem and getting the VC to like kind of emotionally resonate, emotionally resonate and like understand how bad the problem is before they jump into even talking about what the product is. And of course you have to talk about what the product is, but like I think that especially technical founders, it's like they want to jump straight into like this is the core technology and this is what we're how we're applying it and this is the solution and like here's the checkbox of like features and it's like yeah, but rewind back, like why does any of this matter? Right. So that's where I'd love to see founders spend more time.
Okay, so you're a founder, you've perfected your storytelling, you figured out how to get an acting coach to tell you how to get people on an emotional journey. So now that you have this like glorious pitch, what is the next step? How do you start reaching out to VCs? Who do you reach out to first? How do you like strategize your process?
Yeah, and I love that we're like this is something that I think not a lot of people talk about. It's just like the core nuts and bolts tactics of like, okay, I want to fundraise. How do I do it? Like, how do I actually go out and run a successful, tight fundraise process? And I think from a tactical perspective, like the first thing you have to do is build a target list and figure out who you're going to talk to. And my kind of preferred approach for this is like talk to other founders in the space and talk to friendly VCs that you might know in the space and ask them who they think would be a good fit for you and your sector and your product. Because the truth is people in this ecosystem live and breathe. Like people who are in this world, like live and breathe this world and they know everybody and like know of everybody. And if you ask half a dozen founders that are kind of in adjacent, doing things similar or in adjacent spaces who they think would be worth talking to and ask each of them for 5 names, like you're going to come up with a pretty good list. And you don't even have to ask them for intros right away. You can just be like, hey, who are the 5 people that you think would be most appropriate for me to talk to? And then you go off and do your homework and see if you agree. And the other thing I would say is like, I would prioritize people over firms. Truth.
That is really good advice.
Yeah, the truth.
VCs are people. Surprise, surprise.
Sort of part robot, part people. But I mean, the truth is like, even though VCs operate together as a team, a lot of the work that we do and a lot of the like sectors and spaces that we look at, it's pretty independent and it's pretty people in firms tend to like specialize or have specific areas that they're personally passionate about. So I would never go out and be like, hey, I want an intro to Andreessen, right? I would go out and be like, okay, I'm going to research all the people at Andreessen and figure out based on background, based on other companies they've invested in, who I think is most likely to get excited about what I am building.
Right.
And then specifically,
which of their 50 partners?
Yeah. And then specifically ask for an intro to that person and that individual.
So walk me through, basically you have to stalk a person that you want to sell. And I think this is like the number one point of selling something well, is understanding who you're selling to and like what they care about. And I think the first step in that absolutely is looking at their past track record through the firm. But also I think one layer deeper, like go onto their LinkedIn and like see like where they worked, like what they did, what was their engineering, or sorry, as an engineering major, what was their major? Like, do they understand your problem? Like if they don't understand your problem, it's going to be like 20 times harder to sell them on something. What other things like should people stalk before they try to pitch someone?
Like listen to their podcast, read all their blog posts. And it's very time consuming to do that, because the companies that I have in my portfolio that have just ran, I had three that ran Series A fundraise process over the past couple months, and all three of them successfully raised, which is fantastic, and especially in this environment. But the ones that ran successful processes, they pitched 40 to 60 firms, 40 to 60 first meetings. That's a lot of people to research and a lot of podcasts to listen to and blog posts to read. But I will say from a VC perspective, it is very obvious which founders have done their homework on you and which ones have not. Like it is very obvious when they like reiterate something you said in a podcast once, or when they, make a joke about that time right after college when you were working on military satellites, or you know what I mean? It's like very obvious to VCs which founders have done their homework and know who you are and which ones have not. So I would say like spend the time, put in the hours, and like do all the homework before you walk into a first meeting, which is a lot. Like it does add up when you're pitching, Yeah.
And I think especially when there's levels of research that you do on a person, categorize and bucket them into probably high quality, like has similar background, understands my problem space, likely spend the most time on those, put them in one bucket. And then also ones that are like, like generalists, probably don't understand my space very well, lighter diligence on them. And maybe one thing that was a really good piece of advice to me when I was raising for my past startup was bucket them into people that are less likely to sell first. So you get your cycles in, you can practice, you can do the lower level and mess up in front of them first. And then as you refine your pitch, work your way up to those like really high, hard hitting people. And there's a lot, I think, once you're in that mindset of like you're pitching regularly, I was so interested to hear how you play the game of like, how do you run a tight fundraise basically?
Yeah. Like how do you actually keep a process tight?
Yeah.
I think, the probably the most critical piece of all of this is like time synchronization. So I, always coach our founders that are going out to raise. It's like, you want everybody, like, let's say you're going to pitch 50 VCs. You want all 50 ideally moving through the process at the same time. Now, obviously you're not going to be able to take 50 first meetings in the first day, right? Like, nor is it good to take 50 first meetings in the first day, but like you want to keep them all tightly time synchronized so that when you get to the end of the process and the very first term sheet drops, or the very first person insinuates that they're thinking about making an offer, then everyone else is in a similar stage in their process and at a point where they can also make offers. Because the end goal of any fundraise process is not to get a term sheet. The goal is to get multiple term sheets. And
let the FOMO roll, basically, right?
But like get that FOMO wheel like spinning, like because the way to drive up valuations and the way to get the terms that you want are to have multiple bidders and get them competing against each other and create a bidding war. And that's how valuations skyrocket. And that's how two of my companies that just went out to raise, went out raising 4 to 5 million, and one came home with 10, and one came home with 7.5. You know, it's like you'll come home with more money and better terms if you get multiple people competing.
And to underscore that point, it's not necessarily product driven or like specifically traction, like getting that extra 100K LOI is not the thing that necessarily would drive a valuation. What drives up your valuation is that bidding war at the end, right?
Yeah. Which is wild to me, because you can argue that it's like, it's not warranted, or it's not just that founders and I think engineers have a tendency to think like very like, logically, if like more customers equals higher valuation, or more LOIs equals more higher valuation, or like more revenue equals more higher valuation. And that's not how this works. Like it is purely a, you know, market driven, like VC FOMO driven, like thing that valuations get driven up based on how many people you have betting on you.
Welcome to sales, man. I think that's like the hardest thing to digest, especially coming from the engineering straight world where everything's like very orderly, makes sense, it's logical. Sales is not logical, man. It is so much emotion. There's so much of these non-tangible things that have to be integrated and thought through.
Totally.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting points there that we've seen founders kind of have issues with is they'll get VCs to like the next stage and they'll feel like they're close to closing them, and then they'll focus too much attention on those particular VCs. But that's actually the opposite of what you're saying. You should make sure that you're still keeping the top of funnel rolling down. And if one moves down, you got to get everyone else at the same similar stage of approaching a term sheet, for example, or providing a term sheet.
Yes. And I think that's a really good point of like, don't stop pouring more VCs into the top of funnel until you have multiple term sheets in hand, right? Like, do not stop. Like, just because some firm, and maybe it's the firm that you're most excited about, maybe it's Sequoia, and like you definitely want to take their money, and maybe they're starting to talk numbers and insinuating that a term sheet is imminent. Do not stop. Like, keep taking more first meetings, keep pouring more into the top of funnel until you actually have a term sheet signed, because things can always go south or things can change at the last minute. And I've seen VCs, you know, VCs behaving badly. I've seen VCs verbally commit to terms and say that they're going to write a term sheet, and then, you know, 3 days later change their mind. So it's like, until everything is signed and done, don't stop. And I think it can be really draining. I think that like
money in the bank. Money in the bank. It's not done until money. Like we've seen, like even money not arrive in the bank, right, for whatever reason. SVB shut down. You know, who knows?
Oh yeah.
Meanwhile, you've told everyone else
those are tough times. But I think the other, like, you know, tactic, which you know, Sabrina, you were mentioning, that's so important, is like, don't go pitch Sequoia first day of pitching, right? Like, make sure that your first wave of people that you're going out and talking to are friendlies, that they're people that like, you're not going to be crushed. Yeah, you're not going to be crushed if they say no. You know, they're you know, warm up pitches. So I like to have my founders go out and do like a week of pitches with people that, you know, we would take their money. Like they are real investors, and we would be excited to take their money, but they're not like top choice. And people that, you know, maybe I'm close to, or that like the founder is close to, that I know will give the real hard-hitting feedback.
The real feedback. Yeah. And it's surprising that's really important, because we see so many pitches, right, that we can't get emotionally involved enough to give the detailed feedback with everyone. But if it's come through a warm referral, of course we're going to, because it's a friend or it's a friend of a friend. Yeah.
In the back channel, like a lot of times VCs feel more comfortable giving direct feedback to other VCs or other founders than directly to the founder themselves, because you don't want to offend it. Like, we're, you know, most of us,
if you don't know them well,
try to be nice, and like, you don't want to offend them and tell them their baby is ugly. But if like you send me someone and they pitch me, and then you know, Simon calls me up and is like, hey, what'd you think of such and such? I'm much more likely to give him the like totally honest, like raw thoughts than I am to give it directly to the founder. So I think that that's another strategy, is like, especially in the first early stages of pitching, like, make sure you're going out to people that you know you can get good back channel feedback and that will give you real honest thoughts, because your pitch will get better and better. Like you will improve. And if you're and the other thing is you have to be really you can't like, my pitch is done, my slides are done, like now I'm ready to go out. Like it is a living document, like it is a living, like, you know, spiel.
Absolutely.
And every single pitch you come out of, you should be like, well, what worked? What resonated? What didn't resonate? Oh, I'm seeing a pattern. A couple people didn't understand this piece of it. Let me go back and refactor that.
Yeah.
Let me like modify that. You know,
Chrissy,
it's changing every time.
Love this topic. Just kind of speed round. Top 3 mistakes people make on first calls with you. I have hot takes on this. Would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah.
Like in terms of the pitch or the intro, like if you're meeting a new startup, what would you say to new founders? Like these are the top 3 things you have to avoid.
Yes.
I want to hear Sabrina's take too.
Yeah. But top one that I probably see most often is like people start by talking about the first product that they're going to build. Like they spend almost the entire pitch talking about MVP product V1, right? And the truth is, when you're pitching to VCs, all we want to know is like, what is the biggest possible version of this that you can ever build? Like, so it's like, instead, you should always start with like the biggest, long-term vision. Talk about the long vision, and then talk about step 1, step 2, how we're going to get there and why it makes sense. But I think so many times people are just like,
particularly important for pre-seed.
Yeah.
Particularly important for pre-seed. Yep.
Cool. Other mistakes that I see, like not building up the problem, like we talked about earlier, like just jumping too quickly.
Not educating. Assuming that the listener knows the problem. Yeah.
And not like bringing people along for this like story or this emotional journey. And then what else? What is the other mistake that I see people make? Okay. So this is interesting. And a little bit different, but like not asking me questions. Like not
Absolutely. That's going to be one of mine.
Oh, really? It's like a lot of times people
not taking the opportunity to like learn about your target audience before vomiting all your information.
Totally. It's like, I always really respect the founders that come in and are like, hey, before we get started, do you mind if I take 2 minutes to ask you some questions? And I'm like, yes, this is exactly what you should do.
It's amazing how many founders don't feel comfortable doing that. Like they feel like that's not their place or they don't deserve to ask, but it is
your place.
The number one thing. Everyone must do this. Like ask the investor to introduce themselves first. No investor is going to be offended by that. No. I mean, if they do, then that's on them. And you get so much more insight on how to tailor, or you might realize, hey, this guy's a HVAC engineer already. I don't need to explain to him like how HVAC works if I'm building in that area. I can just go straight to explaining, the next level. Or the opposite might occur. This person's a finance background. I really need to kind of explain the problem. Whatever it is, like you'll gain so much more insight on tailoring your pitch.
When I say like the questions at the beginning, also ask there's a checklist of like, what is your average check size? Like what is the number of investments that you do per year? Like per partner per year? Like what are your ownership requirements? Like what's your process to make a decision? Things like that. Because if you say, oh, I'm going to wait until the end and I'm going to ask those questions at the end, you're never going to have time.
You could have wasted everyone's time. I recently had
everyone's time.
Absolutely. I recently had a founder pitch the whole pitch and then at the end say, oh, I realized we might be a little early for you. And they were raising a Series A and we're a pre-seed investor. So obviously that could have been avoided. I still ended up helping them because they were great, but like it was just a disconnect that we should have just aligned on to begin with.
So my favorite story is the opposite of that, which is I had a founder pitch me for his seed round. And then we got to the end and I was like, how much are you raising? And he said $75 million. And I'm like, that is so far out of scope for us. Like no way we would ever do that. And then he got belligerent and was like, well, why did you let me reveal all of our, secret, plans when this was out of scope for you? I was like, you said you were raising a seed.
slightly out of
to that
the
end,
norm.
like I think my
Sabrina.
two biggest red flags are lack of self-awareness and getting defensive. I think that in a pitch, I understand the desire to come across as like you have to posture a little bit, you have to like be extremely confident and understand. But if there are pieces of information that I don't know, the person that you're pitching to was an engineer for a number of years and like has a very deep understanding of the industry, and they ask you a very direct question that you should know the answer to, instead of dismissing it or instead of saying like that's a stupid question and not answering it, it really grates my gears when they just don't listen to reason during the first meeting. And I get that there's a level of rapport that needs to be built on both sides, and we both need to respect each other. But like if there's a lack of respect off the bat, that's like a huge red flag. Me, like the first call is, yes, it's telling me about your business and your idea, but it's also helping us understand you as people. And if there's immediate lack of respect with everyone that you talk to, like it's not going to be a good working relationship long term. So that's probably my number one.
Yep. Top three speed round. Number one, absolutely ask the venture partner, a venture capitalist, what his background is and a little bit about their firm so you can tailor your pitch. Number two, this is storytelling, but storytelling does not mean telling your story chronologically. Like, don't bury like that you have revenue or traction on the 20th slide just because that's the chronological order. Like, make it an emotional roller coaster, like Chrissy said. Get them hooked in the first slide or second slide. Like, I'm going to be sitting at the edge of my seat hearing the rest of the story because, oh my God, they're at the verge of revenue or they've already signed a purchase order. That's the second one. Like, don't bury the money shot in your story, in your deck. Mm-hmm. And then third, I would say, is just like, yeah, don't pitch features, pitch the benefits, and like practice your pitch and get feedback on the story. Yeah.
Solid. I agree with all of those. Like, from the group's opinion, what should a first meeting look like? Like, it's a 30-minute meeting. You have a short period of time where you have to do discovery and you have to pitch elements of what you've built. How should you break up that time?
Yeah. So the thing that I would say is like, your goal of the first meeting is not to tell them everything. Like 30 minutes Absolutely. Is more than enough. And your goal is to get a second meeting. That's it. Nothing more.
That's it. Like, that's it. That's right.
Get a second.
Get them hooked.
Get them hooked. Get them excited enough and interested enough to get a second meeting. That's it. And then the truth is, like, the more time people spend with you and the more time they like touch points they have with you, like the more vested they are in you and your story. So like that connection kind of builds over time. But like 30 minutes, selfishly,
therefore it's probably better not to tell them everything because they'll want to find out more if they just have the hook, but they don't know all the details.
Totally. And I see so many founders that are like, well, I have my slides and I have to get through all of them. And it's like, no, you don't. Mm-hmm. No, you don't. Over-index on the beginning, get them sold on the problem and if I walk away from 30 minutes and all I believe in is the problem and the credibility of the founders, even if I don't know what you're building, if I'm excited about those two things, I'll take a second meeting. I want to know more. I want to know how you're solving it. Right. And I think that like 45 or 60-minute first meetings are a freaking waste of everyone's time, because the truth is, like, for almost every pitch, I know 10 or 15 minutes in whether or not I'm going to take a second meeting. And it's, people don't really end meetings early because it's just like, it's not polite. Like, it's like not a respectful thing to do. But if it's a good fit, and if I walk away excited that after 30 minutes, then I will very quickly schedule a longer follow-up. And I think from a founder perspective, like, and a lot of times, like if I'm excited and I don't have a meeting right afterwards, I'll let it spill over too. So like I'll take a 30-minute meeting and I'll spill over an extra 15 or 20 minutes. So I think from a founder scheduling perspective, if you're booking a bunch of 30-minute pitches, like put buffer time at the end. So like maybe like block off an hour or block off 45 minutes on your calendar, even if the pitch is only 30 minutes, because a lot of times when VCs get excited, they'll let meetings run over if their calendar allows it. So yeah, and I'd also say, the other tactical piece of advice that when it comes to first meetings is do as many of them in person as you possibly can. And I realize this
interesting.
is a huge ask because everybody's scattered everywhere. But like the companies that I had that just successfully raised this fall, like they were getting on a plane every other day and flying all over the country to take first meetings. And it is remarkable looking at the conversion rate from first meeting to second meeting. The remote ones was less than half of that of the like in-person ones. So like I have one of my companies, like first meeting to second meeting conversion rate was 100% when the meetings were done in person, and like 25% when they were not, right? And it's just remarkable how much I think being in person matters. And I realize that's a tall ask. I realize that like when you're in the heat of it, like getting on a plane every other day and doing that for weeks, 3, 4, 6 weeks at a, in a chunk is a lot to ask. But like I can say definitively it matters. It really does.
It's a really good data point. I think a lot of funds have like risen up during the pandemic and didn't have the experience of like 2017 before, where in person was kind of the norm. And I think the industry is absolutely not shifting back. I think it was always there. Like in person has always been better than virtual. And there's only so much that you can do when communicating your story virtually versus in person.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes left. I want to work in one more question, and that is, fundraising is hard. It is a mental roller coaster, an emotional roller coaster. Do you have advice for founders on how to manage that? Or when you're having a company start their fundraise process, like how do you prepare for that on top of just the tactical deck and everything like that?
Yeah, the the honest answer to that is like, get a therapist. Like if you don't already have one, like you said, it is such a like mentally and emotionally taxing thing. And like, get a therapist. And like, if you have children, I have 3 kids under the age of 6 right now. And it's like, if you have kids, like call in parents, fly in grandparents for a few weeks, or like get extra nanny support, or like figure out something, because like the truth is you're going to be at it pretty hard. And navigating through that, like it's like the mental and emotional stamina is probably one of the most difficult pieces of it. And especially when you're going out and you're showing off your baby and your prized child, and people are telling you it's ugly over and over and over and over again, and you're hearing no after no after no after no, and you do that for 4 weeks in a row, and it's really hard not to get beaten.
There is no shame in therapy. It is so important to get yourself mentally and emotionally right at the start of this process. It is hard for everyone. I think a lot of founders also get into the mindset of like, oh, this person just sneezed and raised 15 million. Like, well, firstly, no, that is not true. There's so much that went in the background that you're not even seeing. Like maybe they're like, yeah, we raised it in a month. It was so easy. I guarantee it was not. Like there is so much pre-work that is done before every successful raise that happens behind the scenes. And I love that you shared the number, Chrissy, of like 30 to 40 no's before you get to your yeses. And I think those numbers need to be like really internalized, that no is much more of the pie than the yes. The yes is the sliver that exists, and you have to get really comfortable with the no's and emotionally resilient. I mean, the whole fundraising process is the start of the emotional game. And unfortunately, the rest of your fundraising and your startup journey is also going to be a roller coaster and an emotional journey. And so if the fundraise is hard, and you survive it, that's a great sign that you have what it takes to continue on in the journey. But getting your mental state and your emotional state right for that is incredibly important. And yeah, it can be such an unfortunate downfall for some founders. Like great idea, great humans, great people, but you need to develop that emotional resilience. Yeah, completely agree. Chrissy, this is such a juicy session. I have so many amazing quotes that I'm going to pull from this one, and share with all of our founders. This will be a must watch, I think, for all of our portfolio.
No, this is fun.
Yeah, I think we have one last question. And just to throw it back to the community, who is the most impactful person in your career and why?
So I have to give a shout out. There's a man named Bryson Gardner. And did you guys know Bryson?
I didn't know Bryson.
Okay. So he hired me into Apple. So he's the one who took a chance on me and hired me as an intern back in 2007 when I was like a grad student and I knew nothing. Like I was so green. And Bryson's a class act. Like he was a phenomenal manager. Not micromanaging at all, but like had your back 100% of the time, anytime anything went wrong. And so he's the one who, when he left Apple, and decided to start a company, he gave me a call, and he was the one that convinced me to take a risk and like leave my comfortable job at Square and then go join him on this like crazy early stage startup journey. So I fully credit him for getting me hooked on this and like into this.
Oh, wow.
Into this world, right? And just like honestly having the confidence in me when I did not have the confidence in myself, like having the confidence in me and convincing me to kind of like take the leap. So like I definitely would not be where I am today if it wasn't for Bryson.
That is incredible. I love to hear
That's
amazing
awesome.
mentorship stories. Cheers to him. Very excited about that. Amazing, guys. Thank you so
Let's
much.
drop.
Well done, Simon. Started off early, the day off great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Simon, you want to sign us off?
Sure. Thanks, everyone. This has been a great one. Happy holidays. Beers with VCs with Chrissy Meyer signing off, episode 9. Have a great week.